So looking 50 to 100 years out, which is ridiculously presumptuous for me or anybody else to do, I would say that no, there will not be the same number of financial institutions around.
Who are going to be the biggest players in this market? Is it going to be the traditional banks and the banking groups that we can all name today? Or will it be far more driven by very large technology platforms, very large technology companies sitting behind those things? And I think that's the piece that is to some degree anyone's guess.
If we look ahead to the future, how much will the banking battlefield have evolved? We asked our experts to give us their predictions.
One of the key things I keep looking at is most fintech has not actually changed banking. They've taken what banks do badly and made it cool. What we need to start now doing is looking at how could we use technology to do what banks could never do before in a way in which is far better for customers.
I think that the banks that turn out to be the winners are going to be the ones that learn how to partner with the wider ecosystem, because they don't need to do everything themselves. Banks that really understand how to leverage that same partner network are going to be those that are able to maintain the agility that's going to be needed going forwards, not just for the needs of today and tomorrow, but well into the future.
It's like when the iPhone came out. I mean, Apple's not good at inventing their own circuitry and boards and hardware, but what they are good at is design and putting together and integrating function into a form that the customer desires. Now, we haven't seen that in banking yet, but I think there'll be an organization that takes the function and form of the ecosystem of open banking and build something that's the iPhone for banking, which doesn't exist yet.
But I think a future banking ecosystem will be one that's much more collaborative in nature. It will basically consist of these small independent suppliers who are offering up their capabilities to multiple banks through APIs and other capabilities. Your software will almost typically not be run on-prem, it'll be run on the cloud somewhere. And the role of the bank, or at least the consumer-facing proposition, will be to integrate these various suppliers in a way that works for the consumer. Probably ironically, that will also work at the bottom end of the stack. Banks in one level will be a supplier themselves. They'll offer all these capabilities out via APIs. They'll also do that in conjunction with other suppliers. So they'll at the bottom level, they will also integrate third-party suppliers and then provide those services out through their own APIs. What you've got is a collaborative network of infrastructure.
I think we are going to see a smaller number of players in banking with much larger operations, a bit more fragmentation with specialist providers taking more market share.
The people who get biggest, quickest, usually end up being able to hoover up more people. We're going through a period of time where there's kind of an app for everything. Every slice of financial services has 7 to 10 players who are trying to, really push into that space. And they can't all sustain very significant bases,
So ultimately, it will depend on who can invest in this sector, who can provide innovation more effectively, and who can make the transition from the legacy infrastructures to new banking technology most efficient.
The big winners will be those who see the bigger picture and are aggressive in going about bringing together, incenting, attracting, and aligning the right partners to deliver that value. And the mechanism for that will be platforms. And at the end of the day, the best platform wins. And whether that's a financial institution, or whether that's a fintech, or whether it's some kind of platform in which financial institutions and fintechs are players and it's a separate third-party entity that is actually the platform itself, remains to be seen.
What could these ecosystem changes also mean for the future of money?
Are we going to move from a fiat currency-based digital economy to something else? I doubt it. And why? Not because I'm against technology, far from it. But if you go and talk to Mrs. Smith of Three Acacia Gardens and ask her how she'd like to pay for her shopping in Sainsbury's, there's a reasonable likelihood she'll say with pounds. Because that's what she understands. It's what her kids understand, and it's what her neighbourhood understands. So I think that probably the reality is that fiat currencies will become digital. Will that mean the death of cash? Probably. But not because it's done anything wrong, it's just run out of life. You know, we used to go and exchange goats for value. We don't do that now. So why are we going to hold on to a paper note which has run out of time?
What is money in a truly digital, a completely digital world, in the sense that actually we don't have, 20p's and 2p pieces, then actually I think the world becomes a lot cleaner, because actually everything then is fully accounted for. And actually in a world where everything is fully accounted for, that gives us such a great ability to drive out risk, fraud, anti-money laundering, and all of the horrible reasons why that is, very prevalent in society today.
The challenge we have today is that cash has become invisible. Money has been invisible. It's just data. Within years, will that still exist as our form of value, or will we talk about CBDCs, stable coins, cryptocurrencies, Dogecoin, something else?
On the one hand, I think I can't help but feel that the technology is fundamentally decentralizing. And what we'll see is lots of different kinds of money growing up, not just pounds and dollars and digital pounds and digital dollars, but money that's based on gold, money that's just for London. I mean, if somebody came to you tomorrow and offered to pay you in Amazon money, well, you'd probably take it.
I mean, a lot of the cryptocurrencies at the moment have been mostly focused on, investment rather than potentially, points of sale usage. What I think is really interesting for the economies of the world is when governments and central banks start to take an interest in this. We believe that there could be a great future for that type of money, that type of currency. But I think you'd probably agree with me as well that it's a long time to go yet.
Central bank digital currencies, I'm absolutely fine with. That makes a great deal of sense, because there's still somebody, to a certain degree, controlling liquidity. The difficulty, I think, when you sort of get to much more of a broad brush where you're using cryptocurrencies as that central currency, or you're using cryptocurrencies as a proxy for, interchangeable currencies on a global level, really gets you to, well, if there's nobody controlling the fluctuations around those things, then instability in currencies in that sense just leads to really bad outcomes for people within those systems.
Things like what the UK government's doing now with CBDCs, so central bank digital cryptocurrencies. The Bank of England's running a program now to get all of the information from all the stakeholders, which is really encouraging. I could see Fronted using BritDoc, and I could see companies like Monzo and Starling bilaterally settling 24/7 using central bank digital cryptocurrency. That would mean there's no settlement risk anymore, which means companies don't have to, account for settlement risk. So I think there's a real need for the UK to get behind central bank digital currencies. Like, banking is moving onto the blockchain already, but not in the way people think.
I don't think that cryptographic assets will necessarily replace all legacy forms of money. We will have a hybrid monetary world in which we will have both permissioned, centralized monetary networks that are directly, tightly regulated by the existing regulatory infrastructure. And you will also have interfacing with that these decentralized monetary networks and assets that will be in play. And so if you're a financial institution, what I just said, if that holds true, should encourage you, should embolden you to think very creatively about the different opportunities that new hybrid world will present to your financial institution.
How will all these changes affect the role of the bank itself within the ecosystem?
The core function of a bank of providing efficient store of value, financing economies on the back of that, and enabling payments between customers, that role is going to stay.
I draw this picture, if in all of us in the US, it's 5th grade, it's still in primary school. When you first learn about ecosystems, I like to draw that picture first to everybody and then put it as the bank, right? They're kind of like the sun in that ecosystem picture, right? They're going to be the critical resource that feeds all the other parts that keep the whole ecosystem going.
I don't see the bank's functionality changing that much as far as what they do. It's just how they do it.
But if we're really sort of looking at a future that is much more about algorithms running people's lives, then actually you're buying into this person's algorithms versus this other person's algorithms, right? And at that stage, really, what is the differentiator? Do you really care that somebody's been around for 400 years? Well, I mean, it hasn't held Google or Apple back, has it, in terms of all the things that they can bring to it?
It's going to be a bot working on my behalf that's buying things from the bank's bot. This is AIs doing businesses with AIs. It's not people doing business with people. And so brand, I think, doesn't mean anything in that environment. My bot couldn't care less that your bank is 300 years old and sponsors the rugby. It doesn't mean anything to it. My bot cares about yields, prices, returns. Brand doesn't enter into it.
The role of central banks and banking in terms of the creation of money supply is likely to really change based on DLT and crypto assets. I think we're looking at central bank digital currencies, the ability to create money digitally without the need for a bank to be involved in that process. I think the whole disintermediation will mean that the banking system is going to look very, very different to how it does now.
But I think there are so many huge advantages to distributed ledger technology. So instead of every company, like every bank and every corporation and every e-money company and every fintech running their own ledger, everybody just shares one ledger. That is a huge technological advantage for a country that gets there.
If I'm even partly right about the role of banks, if you assume that those functions are distributed across organizations that do them more efficiently, I mean, this is the world of embedded finance and all this sort of thing, that does point towards banking as volume utility pipes at the back end of these embedded finance services. And when I see people talking about that, to me, that seems quite a plausible vision of the future. Does that mean that kind of Barclays disappears? I'm not so sure about that. Maybe the role of banks, will change to be something that manages the real wealth, which is kind of your identity, your reputation, that kind of stuff. So it sounds, science fiction-y to say, well, in 100 years, I can't see that things will be the same. But I just can't.
It's all to play for on the banking battlefield. But will banks even still be here in this new, disrupted future?
Are banks going to be here in 50 or 100 years? 100%. I think they are. The issue is, what does that bank look like? Is the bank the traditional brick and mortar institution that you always thought it was? Is it a neobank? Is it an organization like Square that now has their own banking license? I think we're seeing these neobanks get banking licenses, and it kind of changes the face of what we think a bank is and what we think a regulated institution is and who those are going to be. Now, how that will play out over time, we don't know. Maybe Wells Fargo will sweep in and buy Square for, hundreds of billions of dollars. We'll see. But I do think that who we think a bank is, our vision of a bank, is going to be wildly different 100 years from now than it is now. However, the people we trust, the entities and institutions we trust to hold on to our money are still going to be regulated. They're still going to be compliant with regulations, and they're going to be like banks. Maybe we'll call them something else.